Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday's announcement from Nissan that it has reversed its decision to build the X-Trail at its Sunderland plant and move it to Japan instead is a bitter blow to the North East, the automotive sector and Britain's industrial strategy. Now, of course, Brexit was not the only reason, but it was pretty prominent in Nissan's decision. To quote their initial statement, "The continued uncertainty around the UK's future relationship with the EU is not helping companies like ours to plan for the future." The Secretary of State's quiet opposition to a no-deal Brexit is, of course, well known, but still the juggernaut of government chaos hurtles on. Even he must be suitably frightened today by the uncertainty being created by his government's negotiating strategy. This week, Nissan has reversed commitments to invest in the UK. Last week, we saw that car production is down 9% to its lowest in 5 years, and fresh investment in the sector halved in 2018, according to the SMMT. Now, when Nissan made the commitment to produce the X-Trail and Qashqai models in Sunderland, the government provided certain assurances, as the Secretary has outlined. After refusing to publish the letter, even in response to Freedom of Information requests, today we finally seen a copy of this letter. The letter acknowledged the uncertainties as the UK prepares to leave the EU, in particular the fear that potential future trade arrangements could affect the business case for investments, and it promised that Nissan would not be adversely affected. Although no firm commitment to a customs union or single market deal was contained within the letter, this was a pretty strong assurance that manufacturers would still be able to trade without barriers. However, Nissan clearly does not have any confidence in these assurances today. So can the Secretary of State confirm why these assurances no longer stand and what has changed in the government's approach since those commitments were made? Is it now government policy to accept that there will be significant trade barriers as we leave the EU and potentially a no-deal situation? If not, can the Secretary of State rule out today the possibility of no deal? Now, the letter went on to support the investment of around £80 million towards Nissan's investments at its Sunderland site in return for the expansion of SUV production. The Secretary noted that £61 million was eventually applied for. And can he confirm whether any of the conditions surrounding this £61 million were written into a formal agreement? Can he also confirm if Nissan will still be receiving the £61 million despite the move? Has he intimated that they may have to reapply for certain forms of grant funding? Can he also confirm what assessment he has made on the impact of yesterday's decision on the wider supply chain, particularly those companies who might have already taken the decision to start investment? Mr. Speaker, the government's letter to Nissan also said it will be a critical priority of our negotiations to support UK car manufacturers and ensure their ability to export to and from the EU is not adversely affected by the UK's future relationship with the EU. Yet it's important to note that Nissan's announcement came days after a free trade agreement was signed between the EU and Japan, where tariffs on Japanese car exports to the EU begin to taper towards zero over the next 10 years. So what assurances can the Secretary give British automotive sector companies today that there will be no tariffs on British-made vehicles entering the EU? Similarly, in relation to cars exported to non-EU countries where the EU currently enjoys preferential trading terms, the International Trade Secretary has, of course, suggested that we can simply replicate them and pegs out EU on the front page of nearly 40 free trade agreements and replace it with the EU, with the UK. But how is he actually getting on with this? And what assurances can the Secretary provide today that Britain will continue to enjoy these trading terms? Further, what assessments has the Secretary made of the risks, the real risks now, of a temporary Brexit-induced slowdown in British manufacturing? And has he examined any temporary support measures he could offer, for example, looking at examples in the German industrial sectors following the financial crash? Finally, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that we have reached a tipping point. I know the Secretary agrees with me that a real industrial strategy is designed to give businesses the confidence to invest for the long term. But his government's handling of Brexit is undermining our industrial strategy. Businesses are no longer speaking out simply to highlight the future dangers of a badly handled Brexit. They're now losing confidence in the government and taking real action to protect their businesses. Mr. Speaker, without real assurances from the Secretary today and a firm commitment from him to take no deal off the table, it's hard not to think that managed decline is indeed the government's plan.
Mr. Speaker, and I think if the Honourable Lady had spent the time talking to the employers in the automotive sector, she'd have come to a set of different conclusions. Because the first point is that she should welcome the fact that Nissan has committed to Sunderland. After the referendum, before any negotiations had taken place, even before Article 50 was triggered, the plant was in jeopardy. And the workforce, the unions and the government worked closely and hard together to secure its future. At the time, her former colleague, the then member for Hartlepool, hailed this as he was former chair of the Select Committee, hailed it as a welcome example of targeted government commitment to a successful campaign and to a strategically vital sector. That commitment continues. She asks about whether the financial support that was applied for by Nissan continues. I hope I was clear in my statement that the support is available to the sector. It has been for many years. They will be invited to resubmit an application in the light of the changed investments that they're making. The second point that the Honourable Lady made is that we need to conclude our Brexit negotiations. But what she spectacularly ignored is that Nissan and the UK automotive industry back the deal that the Prime Minister has negotiated. It achieves what they need. No disorderly Brexit on the 29th of March, a transition period and a commitment to no tariffs, no quotas, no rules of origin checks at the border. The Japanese Automobile Manufacturers Association has welcomed both the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. They've called for this House and the European Parliament to ratify the agreement swiftly. So if she wants to rule out no deal, if that is her concern and her motivation, she should back the calls from the industry to ratify the agreement. And it is the case that the continued uncertainty that I referred to in my statement, she will acknowledge, is a reflection, in part at least, on the opposition's failure to come to a decision and to back the deal. During all of Nissan's 30 years in the UK, it's been able to count on a constructive support from all parties. Yet the Honourable Lady's front bench has evaded having a policy on this vital issue for our country, hiding behind 6Esks that are a fake and a sham, designed expressly to avoid a deal, and they know it. They claim to be representing the workers of this country, but the livelihoods of millions of workers are being jeopardised by the machinations of the people who occupy, I'm afraid, that front bench. In a call from Japan yesterday, a senior Nissan executive had this to say to me. He said, "Please pass on the view to your opposition that they need to meet in a way that forms a deal." I think we should all in this House act on that.
Sir Michael Fallon.